This is the Russ Belville Show, the winner of America's search for the next great progressive talk radio star.
What did he say? What did he say?
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
What did he say? What did he say?
Welcome to the weekend, everybody. I'm Radical Russ Belville, your Red State refugee, and you've got live progressive talk on the weekends. We are broadcasting from the free speech zone that I call the United States of America, live on XM Satellite 167 or a terrestrial station near you. So let's get together here and talk about our day-to-day, paycheck-to-paycheck survival in George W. Bush's neocon nightmare. And what are we going to do to restore our Constitution and to repair America's standing in the world? Yes, we've got a lot to talk about here. And if you'd like to get involved in the conversation, the phone number here is 866-5577-377. That's 866-557-7377. It's not just a phone number, it's an excellent hand in liar's poker. Also, if you'd like to get a hold of me via email on the intertubes, you can email me at radicalruss@gmail.com. Also, take the time to check out the website, radicalruss.net. We've got cartoons up there from Keith Tucker and the What Now Tunes series. Great cartoons up there every week, plus your comments and diaries, all on radicalruss.net. Check it out. Create yourself an account. You could get your feelings and opinions known all around this country and all around the intertubes, as Ted Stevens would call it. Oh, I hope you're all having a great weekend. It's been kind of crazy around here. I've just moved this past week here. Moved from Beaverton, Oregon to Portland, Oregon. So yeah, all those times I told you I was coming from Portland, I was lying. I was actually in Beaverton. Beaverton, Portland, it's kind of the same thing. You know, they're real close to each other and all. So we got moved and moved into the new studios. Those of you who were trying to listen last week, let me my engineer Stevie tells me that Beaverton sounds ruder. Yeah, it does a little. For those of you who were trying to listen last week, I got to apologize. We were having all sorts of technical problems last week, but we've got them cured now. We're live and on the air here on the weekends with plenty of progressive talk radio for you today. And speaking of that, you know, I know that a lot of you are like me. You know, you work a full-time job for a living. You know I do. When I'm not doing this political talk radio show, I have a 40-hour-a-week job, just like most of you do. So we don't always have the time to catch up on the newspapers or the evening news or catch up on the blogs or anything. So at the top of the Russ Belville Show, I like to help you catch up on the week's hottest news topics with
The Week in 90 Seconds.
Hillary Clinton sheds a tear and wins the New Hampshire primaries.
There's no crying in baseball!
Bill Richardson drops out of the Democratic race to retype his 14-page resume.
I am ending my campaign for President of the United States.
John McCain wins big in New Hampshire and suggests we stay in Iraq until we can blast them with our starships.
I don't think Americans are concerned if we're there for 100 years or 1,000 years or 10,000 years.
Ron Paul can't explain why racist newsletters from 1992 have his name on them in 2-inch type font.
Here's the unmentionable secret. Racism isn't that big a deal anymore.
Chief Executive Bush begins his Rescue the Legacy tour in the Middle East.
Iran was a threat. Iran is a threat.
With exciting tales of Iranian speedboats playing chicken with U.S. gunboats. Tales as real as Saddam's WMDs.
I request side the number helo operating in the area this time. Over.
Coalition warship 7-3.
America's lawless mercenaries in Iraq are using poison gas to clear traffic jams. That ought to win some hearts and minds.
How can you shoot women, children? Easy. You just don't need them so much.
This week marks the 1-year anniversary of the surge.
Come on, and search me, they betray us, they betray us, they betray us.
And the 6-year anniversary of Guantanamo Bay.
My view is we had a double Guantanamo.
Oh, and in good news this week. Oh, yeah. We got some football this weekend. Oh, man. I'm telling you, I've got to, for those of you listening to me live, I'm broadcasting here live and on Saturdays live. So when this show is over, I will then be heading out to my local sports pub to watch my beloved 12-time world champion Green Bay Packers and their quarterback, Brett Favre, hallowed be thy name, take on the Seattle Seahawks up in Lambeau Field. Oh, I'm telling you, I've got a lot of hateful stares this week. I'm up here in Portland, Oregon, up in the Pacific Northwest. Everybody here almost is a Seahawks fan, and I've been running around with my green and gold and all of my good luck charms and my cheese head and all of that. So I really, really, really hope the Packers can pull this one out this weekend so that I don't have to eat crow for the rest of the week. There's nothing worse than a Seahawks fan making you eat crow, let me tell you that. But, of course, this isn't a football show. This isn't a sports show. I just like to mention those kind of things because, well, you know, a lot of times people will kind of put down sports and say, sports, it's not that important. But, you know, I used to have this job where I traveled all over the country. You know, I was in a different city every week, you know, and I'd be in California one week and I'd be in New York the next week. And then, who knows, man, I'd be in Davenport, Iowa or, you know, Denver, Colorado. And the one thing that you could always strike up a conversation with someone, you know, when you were out on the road was sports. You know, you could talk about baseball or football and not have to worry about getting into some, you know, disagreement over, you know, something serious, you know, like religion or politics. So that's why I like to bring in some of these stories with football and sports like that. I feel it's one of the things we've got here in America that kind of ties us all together. And speaking of tying us all together here, you know, that's an interesting segue, huh? You know, we're all suffering here this month from some pretty incredible weather. I don't know what's going on where you might be listening to at this moment, because we are on the satellite. You could be just about anywhere on the continent, but up here in Portland, Oregon, we've had some really crazy weather. I mean, not the rain that we always get, but just yesterday, or was it 2 days ago? I can't remember exactly, but we had a tornado touch down in Vancouver, Washington. Yeah, a tornado. That's not, you know, we don't get tornadoes much, or at least we don't hear about them much up here in the Pacific Northwest, so that was kind of crazy. And there's crazy weather going around all over the country. You know, we take a look at the Midwest, we got flooding and tornadoes and some severely unseasonable temperatures, you know, way much higher temperatures than you'd expect during the, you know, middle of January. We have people up in the Northeast that are hitting some incredible temperatures. Boston was up to 67 degrees. Atlantic City hit 68. Syracuse, New York, all the way up to 70 degrees. So the people up in the Northeast, where it should be all snow and freezing and trying to dig out from a blizzard, they're up there, you know, working on their tans. Meanwhile, down in Florida, they're hitting freezing temperatures. Yeah, last week they had a cold snap. Daytona Beach actually got snow. Wow, snow at Daytona Beach. Orlando was down to 31 and Miami got down to 39. So we've got these crazy weather going on, and this is not unexpected, you know. These freakish weather patterns that we're having here, the global climate scientists have been pointing this out for years. They say as the world heats up, as we continue to contribute greenhouse gases that raise the global temperature, we are going to have more floods and more extreme weather where we have either too cold or too hot weather there. So, yeah, this is not to be taken lightly. And the little things we can do, like changing the light bulbs to those little spiral fluorescent light bulbs and maybe taking public transportation to work. I like to think back to President Carter whenever this comes up. You know, I was a big fan of President Carter when he was president of, well, of course I was like 9 or 10, but I was still a big fan of Jimmy Carter. And remember how much guff he got when he got up on the television and told America that we needed to break our addictions and our dependence on foreign oil. Remember how much they teased President Carter when he said we ought to put on a sweater, that we ought to turn the thermostats down and maybe wrap up in a blanket, that we ought to start using solar power. You know, and President Carter, you know, he walked the walk too. He put the solar power panels right up there on the White House and was generating all sorts of renewable power source there for the White House. Of course, as soon as Ronald Reagan came into power, they ripped those solar panels off the roof, and of course, you know the story. We've gone further and further into debt to China and Saudi Arabia, and further more addiction to this foreign oil that has now led to 2 wars in the Middle East. President Carter was right. You know, all those people that were making fun of President Carter, telling us to get green, to be environmental, to start cutting back, President Carter was right. Now, when we come back from the break, we're going to be taking a look at some more of the stories that are on the news lately. Next segment, we'll be looking at the under-the-radar stories. You know, all week you get to hear the stories on talk radio. You've probably caught all the major stories, the primaries and such. So I'm going to give you a look at an under-the-radar story about a man in Ohio who lost his $400,000 life savings to the police. Stay tuned for that, and of course our Lunatic Fringe, the big story, and your calls at 866-5577-377. I'm Radical Russ, your Red State refugee. Stay tuned. We got more coming at you.
Yeah. This is the Russ Belville Show. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
It is with great pride, understanding, and acceptance that I am ending my campaign for President of the United States.
Yes, that's Governor Bill Richardson from New Mexico announcing the end of his campaign, leaving just 5 Democrats standing in the race. Of course, our front-runners, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and John Edwards. But a lot of people, of course, have forgotten that Dennis Kucinich is still in it, as well as former Senator Mike Gravel of Alaska. But, you know, they're not viable. They're not electable. Oh, man, I get so sick of hearing that, not electable. Look, if you were born in the United States and you're 35 years old, you're electable, okay? What they're trying to say is the corporate masters and the money people won't support them. That's what they're trying to say. They don't have enough money, and we need to get money out of our politics sooner rather than later. But at this point of the show, I'd like to introduce a new segment. This is something I want to start taking a look at throughout the week. You know, I got to thinking that every week I come here and do this show, and I kind of recap a lot of the stories that you've probably heard talked to death on all the other shows. So I figured this is a chance for us to get under the radar. Every week at the Russ Belville Show, we sift through headlines to find the stories buried in the back pages or ignored on the evening news. Stories our citizens and our leaders need to hear. In this segment, we go under the radar. So for our Under the Radar segment this week, I want to talk to you about a story that I picked up coming out of Ohio. This was in the city of Lima, Ohio, which I'm told is kind of a little bit of a small town, Ohio. Not, super small, but just, a little bit of small town, Ohio. And I want to tell you the story of Luther Ricks Sr. Now, this man, Luther Ricks Sr., is a 63-year-old man, and he had worked all his life in the Ohio Steel Foundry, which is pretty backbreaking work. Working in the steel foundry, hot molten steel, heavy-duty, hard labor type of work. So he worked all his life in this steel foundry. Now, Luther Ricks Sr. never really liked banks very much. He was never one to trust a bank, so he had a safe at his home, and he would store money in the safe at his home. He and his wife, Meredith, who both worked, would from, paycheck to paycheck, scrimp and save what little bits of extra money they had and put it away in their safe in their home. So by the time he reaches age 63 and he's looking forward to retirement, Luther Ricks and his wife have $402,767 in this safe. So they've got themselves a nice little nest egg built up. Unfortunately, what happened is that there was a home invasion type robbery at the Ricks household, and this was last June 30th. Luther Ricks and his son were being attacked by 2 men, and Luther's son was stabbed. Now, Luther Ricks broke free. He grabbed a gun and shot to death one of the 32-year-old attackers. Now, this brought the police, of course, and they determined that it was, self-defense. The robbers were never had the time to get to the safe and steal the money. So, story over, right? The cops come in, they find out that the guy was in self-defense. It was a robbery. That's the end of the story, right? Wrong. Because when the police came in there, they found that Luther Ricks Sr. had some marijuana. Yes, the poor man had some marijuana in his house. And this is the quote from Luther Ricks. He says that he uses the marijuana to manage his pain. Quote, "I smoke marijuana. I have arthritis. I have shingles and a hip replacement." I mean, the guy's worked, for over 40 years at a steel foundry, and he's 63. He's retired, close to retirement. He smokes a little pot to help deal with his chronic pain. Now, if he was in one of the 12 medical marijuana states, that'd have been the end of the story. They'd have just checked to see if he was under his limit, checked to see if he was registered, and the police would be on his way. But since he's in Ohio, which hasn't approved medical marijuana, the cops turned the marijuana and the case over to the FBI. And the FBI seized the $402,000 out of this man's safe. This all comes under what they call the doctrine of asset forfeiture, civil asset forfeiture. And what this means is, when the police take the money, they don't have to charge the man with any sort of crime. He doesn't have to be convicted of any sort of crime. The money is charged with a crime. Yeah, imagine that. The money is charged with a crime. The money is guilty of being drug money, allegedly. And the way that the laws are written with civil asset forfeiture, Luther Ricks has to prove the money is innocent. That's right. The money is not considered innocent until proven guilty. It's considered guilty until proven innocent. So this man whose house was robbed and who defended himself with a firearm against an attacker half his age, the FBI has seized this man's life savings and are claiming that this was ill-gotten proceeds from drug dealing. Yeah, right. 63-year-old man, retired guy from a steel foundry with multiple arthritis and a hip replacement. Sure, he's a drug kingpin. He's a regular Medellin cartel, right? So the FBI is refusing to give back this man's money. The ACLU has jumped in, but they're saying, the chances are against them just because of the way this law is written. Now, the law was originally written, this asset forfeiture was written. The idea was to try to seize the proceeds of, these big drug kingpins, their boats and their cars and their fancy houses, and then use that money in law enforcement to help the police officers to get more cars and more weapons and more staff and so on. But that's not the way it's worked out. The way it's worked out is, of course, this has turned police work into a profit-ridden venture. This has turned it into, for the cops, looking for the easiest person to bust who will give them the biggest payday. This is not the way we should be running our police. Not at all. But this is something that flies under the radar for a lot of people because they don't pay a whole lot of attention to this war on certain American citizens using non-pharmaceutical, non-alcoholic, tobacco-free drugs. Yeah. Had the guy been on opiates, had he had some sort of prescription for painkillers, addictive opiate side effect laden toxic painkillers, he'd still have his $400,000. But because he chose to grow a safe, relatively effective, very low side effect, absolutely non-toxic plant, well, then he deserves to lose all his money. He's probably a drug dealer. 63-year-old man, probably a drug dealer. Oh, and, I told this story to my wife as I was preparing the story. And I told her all about what had happened and how he got busted and how they thought he was a drug dealer and everything. And the first thing she turned to me and said was he African American? And yes, he was. Now, I don't think that necessarily had anything to do with the case. The civil asset forfeiture happens to all people, white, black, brown, and in between. But interesting that she would think that question and she would turn out to be right. So check out my blog at radicalruss.net. I've got the details on that story. You can check out the links for yourself and learn more about civil asset forfeiture and what we can do to end it. Talk to your congressman. Tell him you want some laws passed to end this travesty of civil asset forfeiture. I'm Radical Russ, your red state refugee. We'll be taking your calls later on at 866-55-77-377. Coming right back right after the news break.
This is the Russ Belville Show, the winner of America's search for the next great progressive talk radio star.
Hello again, it's 35 after the hour, and you're listening to live weekend progressive talk for the average working class American from an average working class American. That's me, Radical Russ Belville. Glad to have you here, everyone on the North American continent. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, it's going to be quite the weekend here. I'm still waiting for my Packers to play. I've got like 2 hours before kickoff. Oh, boy, I can't wait. And got a couple of friends of mine from Denver who just up and decided to buy a couple of tickets and fly to Lambeau. So, Scott and Brenda, if you're out there, enjoy the game. I know it'll be a good one after we defeat those Seahawks. And, by the way, what is a Seahawk anyway? I mean, I've seen seagulls and I've seen falcons, and what the heck is a Seahawk? I think your team ought to be named after something that really exists, don't you? Anyway, just wanted to turn here. You know, one of the things that we get accused of sometimes, the neocon regressives out there like to say that we hate America first, and I like to say that we liberals, love America the most. And that's why we're so disappointed in how badly the regressives trash her reputation and treat her people. So to demonstrate how the regressives have harmed America this week, we present to you our Living in America segment.
Our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we.
Yeah, Living in America, and the story for the day would be the American economy. Oh, yeah. Get down. Man, I miss James Brown, don't you? I feel good. Yeah, I miss James Brown. I know. Oh boy. But yeah, the economy. This is the big story here. You know, everybody's been tiptoeing around the R word. Recession. Yes, they've been tiptoeing around the R word, and lately Goldman Sachs, some of the other mortgage brokers, and all the big hedge fund managers and such out there are talking about how we are headed toward recession. The numbers are proving it. We've got the jobless figures have come out, and the unemployment rate has risen to 5%. We got less and less jobs here in America. In the month of December, only 18,000 new jobs created in the month of December. 18,000. And this is in December, right? They had a fall off in retail hiring in December when it's the holidays, when they need more people to be clerking. We're seeing the rates of personal savings dropping to all-time record lows not seen since right before the Great Depression. All of the economic policies of the Bush administration have come to bear here. They're starting to bear their fruit, and this is not any sort of accident. You got to remember who we're talking about here when we talk about what George Bush cares about.
This is an impressive crowd, the haves and the have-mores. Some people call you the elite. I call you my base.
So you got to remember, all of George Bush's policies, ever since coming into office in 2001, have all been designed to funnel money away from the middle class and up to the top tenth of 1%. I went over some statistics last week about this regarding wealth in America. And when you realize that there are 400 billionaires in America who have the same combined net worth as 56 million American families, there's something very, very wrong with that. And people are crying out for relief. We've got foreclosures that are happening because of this subprime lending fiasco. We've got people out of work, people without health care, and all George Bush can do is keep repeating the same mantra that he's been repeating since 2001.
The smartest thing we can do is to keep taxes low. In a time of economic uncertainty, we don't need to be taking money out of your pocket.
But see, that's always the answer, isn't it? That's always the answer coming out of the right wing, is to lower taxes. When George W. Bush came into office in 2001, he had a great economy. He had inherited that Clinton economy. We'd had people that were at work, wages were up, everybody was feeling great. We had a surplus in our budget. And so he said, well, we need to cut taxes. So when things were good, we needed to cut taxes, and now that things are bad, we need to cut taxes. We need to keep the taxes low. No, that's exactly the wrong answer, Mr. Bush. The proper answer here is that we need to start having the corporations and start having the very, very ultra-rich pay their fair share. That's right, pay their fair share. How much did you get out of your tax cut, average middle class or working class American out there? You know, I looked at my tax cuts. I did the math. I think I came out with $300, I think it was. Yeah, George W. Bush's tax cut saved me $300. Yippee! That buys me what, 2-3 tanks of gas now? Come on here. With all the prices going up and, you know, of course, as the fuel prices hit $100 a barrel for heating oil, we're seeing a record heating oil prices up there in the Northeast. As these prices continue to raise and as the gasoline prices continue to raise, the prices of everything else continues to raise as well. Have you tried to buy a gallon of milk lately or a loaf of bread? I'm seeing bread coming up to like $2 a loaf. Gallons of milk come up to $4 a gallon. These are the kind of numbers that impact you and me, that impact the average American working family. And all George Bush can do is sit there and talk about how we need to keep taxes low. Look, I'm not advocating raising taxes on any working family. There's no need for it. If we were only to just raise the taxes back to the pre-Bush levels, we might be out of a lot of these circumstances here. We would have a lot better economy. The trickle-down economics does not work. We've known this since the days of Ronald Reagan when George Bush's daddy said it was voodoo economics, and he was absolutely right. It's voodoo economics. When you give money to the top tier of the pyramid, they save it. They invest it in things that better themselves. They continue to hoard their wealth. When you distribute money to the bottom of the pyramid, people spend it. When you give a tax break to a poor person, to a working class person, they use the savings that they had from the tax break to pay off debts, to pay off bills, to buy things, consumer spending. Trickle up economics is what we need to start talking about, not these continued trickle down economics. And the jobs feature. This is something, you know, now that the unemployment rates have been raising up to 5% now, Bush is finally coming out and starting to mention something about the job situation. But before that, his administration would keep crowing about how successful they were at creating jobs, how they were able to create so many new jobs and everybody's working and the unemployment rate is so low. Well, the problem is, what kind of jobs are you creating? What kind of jobs are they? If it's a McDonald's job, if it's a Walmart job, if it's the kind of job that you can only work 28 hours a week and get no benefits, having that job, while it's better than no job, is certainly not as good as the jobs we used to have, where you had 40-hour weeks and you had benefits and pensions, assuming that Enron or somebody didn't steal your pension. But yeah, we just got to get back to the politics for the people. We got to start thinking about the average working class person out there. As far as George Bush is concerned, he thinks it's a successful thing if you can work more and more jobs.
You work 3 jobs.
3 jobs, yes.
Uniquely American, isn't it? I mean, that is fantastic.
Yeah, that is fantastic, working 3 jobs. That poor woman shouldn't have to work 3 jobs. She should be able to work 1 job and be able to support her family. This is what conservative economics has wrought. This is no mistake. This is exactly by design. This is what they wanted. They have wanted for 20, 30, 40, 50 years to undo FDR's New Deal, to undo all the guarantees that helped to make a strong and vibrant middle class, because they realized through the 60s and the 70s, when people have a middle class, when people have some power, when people have some security, they start to pay attention to the rest of the world. They start to pay attention to their politicians. They start voting and protesting. Ooh, can't have that. Can't have the masses out there raising rabble and causing problems for the bottom line. That's been their plan since the beginning. Now, I'm Radical Russ, your Red State refugee. When we come back, we've got more stories for you coming up here in our last segment of the hour. At the top of the next hour, we'll be talking about the big story, of course, the upcoming primaries, South Carolina, Super Tuesday. They're all coming up. We'll be taking your calls at the bottom of the next hour at 866-55-77-377. But coming up in the next segment, stay tuned. We're going to have, as always, our Lunatic Fringe Awards. I'm Russ Belville. We'll be right back.
This is the Russ Belville Show. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Welcome back. It's 50 after the hour, and you found the weekend home for the working class survivors of George W. Bush's neocon nightmare. Now it's time for our weekly roundup of the right wing's altered reality. From the Guano Loco neocon chicken hawks to the hypocritical American Taliban and the cable news punditocracy, the Russ Belville Show presents the Lunatic Fringe Award, an award dedicated to the politician, pundit, or preacher who said the most ignorant, hateful, or bizarre quote of the week. Yes, every week we like to cover the Lunatic Fringe because, gosh, there's just so many of them out there on the right wing that, boy, somebody's got to tally all this stuff up, and I voted for me. So here we go. Our first contestant here in the Lunatic Fringe is the Novacula. That's right, Bob Novak, the columnist who outed a CIA agent, treasonously outed a CIA agent and somehow never got charged with anything. Anyway, Bob Novak was on one of the Talking Head shows the other day, and they were discussing the candidacy and the surprising win of Senator Barack Obama. And, well, you know, Bob Novak, he's an old white guy, and his comments here with regards to Senator Obama, they might be a little bit more reflective of a lot of people in America. Even Joe Biden got caught saying something similar to this.
I think the only potential Achilles heel is in a general election if there is some racist prejudice. I'm not sure there is. He is, you know, as poor Joe Biden said, he's clean. You know, he isn't a stereotype African American, and I think he's a very strong candidate.
He's not a stereotype African American. He's clean. he's clean, like he washes himself. Man, you know, Joe Biden, what he's referencing there, too, is when Joe Biden had said he was articulate. He was clean and articulate. You know, and again, you know what they're saying. They're referencing back to Jesse Jackson and referencing back to Al Sharpton, who have more of the black preacher type of cadence when they speak and so on. And this continual mention about Barack Obama and this concept about whether or not America is ready to elect a black president. Look, we're more than ready. We're more than ready to elect a black president. I mean, we got no problems electing black governors and black senators and black mayors. And, you know, just turn on the TV, turn on the TV or the movies, and you've seen Morgan Freeman as the president and Dennis Haysbert as the president. And, you know, we're more than ready for a black president. It's time to drop this whole thing about, are we ready for a black president? And certainly these descriptions of Obama as clean and articulate, that's got to go too. But, I can't give the award to Bob this week just because, that's not nearly fringy enough. There's too many people that actually feel that way for it to really be called the Lunatic Fringe. So let's move on to one of Jehovah's favorite messengers down here on earth, someone who communes with God regularly. The so-called Reverend Pat Robertson of the 700 Club recently had said on his TV show that he had spoken with God and God had told him who was going to win the presidency.
Well, I felt so, but I'm a little shaky on it, and I didn't want to say anything about it publicly. I'm not sure I heard from the Lord.
We're not sure.
If I did, I hope I heard wrong.
So Pat Robertson says he heard from God who's going to win the presidency, and he hopes that he heard wrong. Well, great. If it's someone that Pat Robertson would not like to see as president, then I'm voting for that person, whoever it might be. But can't give it to Pat today because he hedged a little too much. Wouldn't come down and actually tell us what the maker and shaper of all the known universe has to say about our presidential elections. So I'm going to turn to Jonah Goldberg now. Jonah Goldberg's out there. He's one of these conservative talking head pundit types. Got his job from his mom's name, basically, Lucy Ann Goldberg. But anyway, Jonah Goldberg's got a book out there trying to tie liberals to fascism. Yes, he's describing the new fascism of liberals here. And just let me turn it over to Jonah.
But you're not suggesting in this book, though, that you can draw a line from Mussolini to Hillary Clinton or Mussolini to Barack Obama, are you?
Well, I'm saying you can draw a line, but it's not a straight one. It goes all sorts of different places. I'm not saying that today's liberalism is the son of Nazism or a son of Italian fascism. I'm saying it's sort of like the great-grandniece once removed. They have some common DNA, some common themes, some family resemblances that come up.
Let me explain this in small words so Mr. Goldberg can understand. Fascism, as defined by Mussolini and, well, the dictionary, is the merging of corporate and state interests. It's basically government of, for, and by the corporations. That is the textbook definition of fascism. Now, the textbook definition of liberalism is one who is progressive, one who believes in the solutions of the commons, that we can gather together as a common people and a common government to solve our own problems. And in other words, liberalism and fascism are opposites. They're nowhere close to each other. It's kind of like saying compassionate conservatism. So Jonah Goldberg for demonstrating the political naivete of a Fox News viewer and the rewriting of history worthy of Michelle Malkin. You are the winner of this week's Lunatic Fringe Awards. Yeah, there's lots of them out there. Now, I have a special note here that I have to add to this, an extra special addition to the Lunatic Fringe this week. Goes out to Ron Paul, the congressman running for president. This has no audio, so I'm just going to have to read it to you. Ron Paul had a newsletter that used to come out back in the 90s, mid-90s, called the Ron Paul Political Report. And in this newsletter, he had all sorts of racist positions. He quoted saying that Martin Luther King was described as a pro-communist philanderer. In June of 92, right after the L.A. riots, he said, quote, "Order was only restored in L.A. when it came time for the blacks to pick up their welfare checks," quote. And another quote, "The criminals who terrorize our cities in riots and on every non-riot day are not exclusively young black males, but they largely are. As children, they are trained to hate whites, to believe that white oppression is responsible for all black ills, to, quote, fight the power, to steal and loot as much money from the white enemy as possible," end quote. Continuing on in the Ron Paul Political Report from October of 1992, he describes carjacking as the, quote, hip-hop thing to do among urban youth who play unsuspecting whites like pianos. And to conclude, one of his last quotes here, he says, "As an ex-cop, I frankly don't know what to make of such advice, but even in my little town of Lake Jackson, Texas, I've urged everyone I know to use a gun in self-defense, for the animals are coming." This came from the Ron Paul Political Report. Now, Ron Paul is saying he didn't write that. He didn't know who wrote that. But it came out on his newsletter with his name in 2.5-inch tall letters at the top of the newsletter. So if he didn't write it, then he didn't have enough clue to know who was writing it. And is this the kind of guy we want running our country? I'm Radical Russ, 58 After. We'll be right back.
This is the Russ Belville Show, the winner of America's search for the next great progressive talk radio star.
What did he say? What did he say?
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
What did he say? What did he say?
Bring him on. I don't think I ever said I'm not worried about Osama bin Laden. It's kind of one of those exaggerations.
Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job.
Oh, Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job, too. Yes, welcome back to the weekend. Hello, North America. I'm Radical Russ Belville, and I'm broadcasting from the free speech zone we call the United States, live on XM Satellite 167 or a terrestrial station near you. Let's talk about our day-to-day paycheck-to-paycheck survival here in George W. Bush's neocon nightmare. And what are we going to do to restore our Constitution and repair America's standing in the world? And thank you for tuning in. I do want to make one program note here. We're going to have to forego the listener calls for today. There's some sort of telephone error that we're having to deal with here, and we just can't get them to connect. So if you really want to express your pleasure or displeasure with what I might be saying, send me an email. Email address is radicalruss@gmail.com. We're so sorry, listeners. I know you want to get involved and talk, and gosh, sometimes these things happen. It's the technology era. But you can, again, send me an email, radicalruss@gmail.com. And speaking of our latest stories here, I want to turn to the big story, of course, which is the presidential elections that are coming up. We had Hillary Clinton winning the New Hampshire primary, and John McCain winning on the Republican side in the New Hampshire primary. And we've got all sorts of interesting developments that are taking place now. First of all, Governor Bill Richardson, he decided that he was going to step down.
It is with great pride, understanding, and acceptance that I am ending my campaign for President of the United States.
It's kind of a shame that Bill Richardson's out of the race. I don't think he really got the attention that he deserved. When you talk Hillary Clinton, and a lot of these people want to come out and talk about experience. Man, if you want to talk experience, check a look at the resume of Governor Bill Richardson. I mean, he's been an ambassador. He's been in the cabinet secretary. He's been a governor. He's done a lot of negotiations. The man, like I said in last hour, he's got like a 14-page resume. And I really think he deserved a little bit more of a voice within the primary system. But the way things are built this year, it's just so crazy the way all of these states have leapfrogged each other to try to be the first state to get this primary out of the way. It's almost as if the entire country just can't wait to see George W. Bush back in Crawford, Texas, clearing brush on his critterless ranch. Everybody wants to be first. They want to be the important ones. And so, of course, Iowa's the first one, and they jumped ahead to January 3rd. And so New Hampshire had to keep up, and they jumped ahead to January 8th. And now this has caused some problems with some of the states that have violated their party's directive as far as when they can hold their primary. And for my listeners in Michigan, you are one of those states. Michigan went ahead and jumped their primary ahead to January 15th. That's coming up around the corner here. That's next Tuesday, the primaries in Michigan. And the Democratic Party said, no, you can't move your primary to that soon. We don't want you to have your primary then. And Michigan went ahead and did it anyway. And I understand why the states are doing this. They want to have a voice. They want to be relevant in this discussion. I'm living out here in Portland, Oregon. We don't even have our primary till May 20th. By May 20th, this thing's going to be in the bag for somebody. And that's just sad. It's just sad that, two states like Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, some of these early primary states get to have such a voice in choosing who is going to be our presidential candidates. Out here in Oregon, there is a huge base of support for Dennis Kucinich. Imagine if the Oregon primary was the first in the nation and not the Iowa primary, or caucus, excuse me. If Oregon was first and Kucinich, what if he came in with like a 5% or a 10%? Would he start to get a little more attention? But no, that's not what's going to happen, because he's completely ignored in Iowa, completely ignored in New Hampshire, not even on the ballot in some places, and the man doesn't stand a chance, because we have this system that is so rigged for the entrenched interests in both parties. In both parties, it's rigged for the entrenched interests. So anyway, returning back to Michigan. With the state of Michigan, what's going on there is the Democrats have canceled or withdrawn all the delegates from Michigan. They're saying, okay, that's your punishment. You're grounded. Since you guys moved your primary forward, you don't get to have any say. And so that has led to is in Michigan, the only Democrat on the ballot in Michigan is Hillary Clinton. The only Democrat on the ballot is Hillary Clinton. And supposedly it doesn't matter because their delegates won't be counted anyway. This has led to an interesting little political play by one of us left-wing bloggers out here. You know us bloggers, right? The left-wing bloggers. Marcos Melitsas, who runs the influential blog Daily Kos, the number one read political progressive blog out there. Marcos has come up with this great idea. He says, since the Democratic Party's primary isn't going to count, and since Michigan has an open primary system. Now, that just means that you can go vote in any primary. You can go vote Democrat, you can go vote Republican, regardless of how you're registered. So Democrats can go vote in the Republican primary, Republicans can vote in the Democratic Party primary. It doesn't matter. So Marcos's idea here is that all Democrats in the state of Michigan should go vote in the Republican primary, and vote for Mitt Romney. Yeah, vote for Mitt Romney. Can you believe that? A leading liberal progressive blog is saying that we should go out and vote for Mitt Romney.
My view is we had a double Guantanamo.
Yeah, that guy, the double Guantanamo guy. Now, here's his theory. His theory is this, is that the Republican establishment, a lot of these people, McCain and Huckabee are fighting it out, and Romney's kind of falling behind. And Michigan looks to be his firewall. His father was the governor of Michigan, a very popular progressive governor in Michigan. And so Romney feels that he can get that support in Michigan. And if he can win Michigan, that'll be the bump that'll keep him in the race. And that's Marcos's point. Marcos's point here is, let's keep Mitt Romney in the race. The guy's loaded with money. He's been putting out negative attack ads the whole time, and we've always found that the more negative ads there are in the campaign, the more that depresses the turnout in that campaign. And so the more that we can keep Mitt Romney in the race and have Huckabee having to continue his, Jesus likes me better campaign against Mitt Romney, and the more McCain has to fight against Mitt Romney's former positions, his flip-floppery, as you will, the more of that's going on, the more that they have to fight each other, the less they'll have left to fight us. So I don't know. I think that's kind of an interesting idea, voting for Romney in Michigan. You Democrats out there in Michigan, think about that. It's not like you had anyone else to vote for other than Hillary Clinton. And speaking of Hillary Clinton, I wanted to make this point, talking about Hillary and her win in New Hampshire. There's a lot of the pundits out there talking about how she showed her humanity. She kind of teared up at that meeting, and that might have led to people feeling sorry for her or wanting to support her, because now they feel she's more likable and more human. And one of the things that Hillary's been doing in the meantime is running all these commercials and campaign speeches that these could be right out of the Dick Cheney playbook. Seriously, you remember when Dick Cheney during the 2004 election came out and said, "Oh, well, if you vote for John Kerry, the terrorists will want you to vote for Kerry, and they'll attack. So if you want to be safe, you don't want to vote for Kerry, because if you vote for Kerry, you remember the whole thing, right? If you vote for Kerry, the terrorists are going to attack, right?" Hillary's been doing something kind of similar. She's been talking about Barack Obama, and he's nipping on her heels there, and she's been talking about her experience and how when Gordon Brown, the new Prime Minister of England, was sworn in, right after Tony Blair, that as soon as this new Prime Minister was sworn in, there were terrorist attacks, and so this was like an instant test of Gordon Brown's leadership. And she's trying to imply that you don't want to roll the dice with Barack Obama, because he won't have the experience, and if he gets in, the terrorists will try to test us by attacking and to see whether or not Barack Obama can stand up to him. And that's the kind of politicking that we need to get away from. That's something that's just another feather here in the Hillary cap as far as my concern against her candidacy here. She keeps talking about strong leadership. We need to have strong leadership. Her experience and her strong leadership, that led her to vote for the Iraq resolution, vote for the Iran resolution, vote for the Patriot Act, strong leadership. Well, you know what? I don't want strong leadership. We've had strong leadership. George W. Bush, give him this credit. George W. Bush is a strong leader. He kept the Republican Party in lockstep for 6 years. He got everything he wanted. George W. Bush is a very strong leader. A bad leader, leading us down off of a cliff, but a strong leader. I don't want strong leadership. I want smart leadership. And that's what I think Obama and Edwards, if they want to make some more headway, they should start making that comparison. That it's not about strong leadership, it's about smart leadership. It's about being right the first time when you're asked to vote on a war. It's about being right the first time when asked to support a president's ambitions to invade the Middle East. All right, well, when we come back from the break, we'll talk a little bit more about the primary schedules. More news here in the politics here about endorsements for Barack Obama, some troubles in the Giuliani campaign, and how McCain has jumped into the leadership position with his victory in New Hampshire. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show, the home for truly radical progressives. We'll be right back after these short commercial messages.
Radical Russ now. 866-557-7377. This is the Russ Belville Show.
Welcome back to the show at 22 after the hour. I'm Radical Russ, ready to take our country back, one person at a time on the weekends. Remember, it's still we the people, not we the corporations. Yeah, time to give the people what they want.
Our freedom of speech is freedom of death. We got to fight the powers that be. Fight the power.
Yeah, that's right. Fighting the power. One boy, one girl, one person at a time every weekend here on the Russ Belville Show. Glad to have you back here. Yeah, Stevie says, yeah, boy. Yeah. Thanks, Stevie. I got Stevie Webb back there working on the board there, so yeah, I just wanted to take a look at how we're fighting the power this week. And, of course, it's all about the primary season. It's all about what's coming up in this next couple of weeks here. On the 15th, on Tuesday, we've got the Michigan Democratic primary, although the Democratic National Committee took away their delegates because they moved their primary date up. The 15th is also Michigan GOP. And that's where we're talking about the Democrats possibly going out and voting for Mitt Romney just to kind of stir up some difficulties there for the Republicans. That ought to be fun. On the 19th, we've got Nevada's caucuses, both on the Democrats and the Republican side. And on the Republican side, the 19th will give us the South Carolina primaries there on the GOP side. We're looking at the possibility of McCain really adding to his lead there. According to the recent polls, national polls, McCain has now jumped to the front runner. He's up to 34% support, a 21-point bump since winning New Hampshire. I think the GOP has finally come to their senses a little bit and realized that of all of the wackaloons they've got running on their side, McCain's probably the least crazy of them all. You know, you got Huckabee, Jesus loves me, this I know. Yeah. You got Huckabee, you got Romney, the CEO candidate, and of course you got Rudy 9/11 Giuliani, and, unless he's running for president in 9/11, he doesn't have much of a chance there. Excuse me there. Now, on the 26th is when the South Carolina primary will be for the Democrats as well, followed by Florida on the 29th of January, and that'll round out January. Leading on to February 5th, which is going to be the super-duper Tuesday, we got all sorts of states that are having their Republican and Democratic not debates, but their primaries and caucuses there as of February 5th. So by February 5th, this whole thing might all be wrapped up. We might have the nominees sewed up in both the Democratic and Republican side, which, again, I got a problem with that. I got a major issue with February 5th and only these handful of states being the people that decide who's going to be our nominees. Us folks out here in Oregon, we don't get to decide till May 20th who we want to pick. And you got to feel really, really bad for the people out there in South Dakota and Montana. They don't get to decide until June 3rd. June 3rd. By then, we'll have been inundated by 3 or 4 months of commercials from the candidates from each side, from the two, selected nominees by that point. I really wish we could go to some other system, some sort of system of a national primary, national caucus. It's about time we started thinking toward those directions here. It's one of the things I think we could do to definitely improve our political system. This is just ridiculous how this has turned out here. Now, talking about some of the endorsements that have come out. This was big news that came out this week about Senator John Kerry. John Kerry, who ran for president in 2004 with John Edwards as his vice presidential running mate, has endorsed Barack Obama. That's an interesting kind of turn of the screw, isn't it? They're endorsing the opponent of your vice presidential nominee. Now, I mean, it may not be the most crazy thing in the world. I mean, I imagine if Joe Lieberman were running right now that Al Gore wouldn't support him. I doubt any Democrat would support him. But, this has kind of stirred up some interest about Kerry endorsing Obama in that when the election was contested in Ohio in 2004, remember John Kerry talking about counting every vote? And then as soon as it was decided that he didn't win, he folded up like a cheap circus tent. And John Edwards said, no, we need to count every vote. We need to fight. John Edwards, the trial lawyer, the man who is used to fighting for what he believes in. And Kerry said, no, we're not going to fight. Nah, it's okay. Yeah, so that might be the story behind their disagreement right there as to why Kerry wouldn't endorse him. Obama has also picked up a couple other endorsements in the Senate. Ben Nelson from Nebraska, who's one of the most conservative Democrats out there. They call him the Blue Dog Democrats. Ben Nelson has endorsed Barack Obama, as has Senator Tim Johnson from South Dakota. You'll remember Tim Johnson's the one who suffered the, I think it was a brain aneurysm or some sort of a problem there that kept him out of voting for a while. But he's come back. He's on the mend. And the South Dakota senator has endorsed Barack Obama. So for all this talk, again, I go back to that talk about, is America ready to elect a black president? We've got the senators from Nebraska and South Dakota that are endorsing the guy, and he wins in Iowa. The Midwest is ready. The Northwest is ready. The Northeast is ready. The South, believe it or not, I even believe the South is ready to elect a black man president. I mean, you just think about the population down there. If we could get all of the African-American voters down in the South voting, this would be a landslide. There might be a new Southern strategy. Imagine that, a new Southern strategy where the minority candidate actually benefits from the Southern vote. Wouldn't that be nice to see? So we've got that going on now. On the Giuliani camp, there's some sad news over to report for poor Rudy Giuliani. He's running out of money. He's decided to hole up in Florida. He's not even trying to advertise in Nevada, South Carolina, or Michigan. He knows that he's got very little chance out there. He's counting on Florida to be his firewall. He thinks that since there's so many New York transplants down in Florida, that he could probably do very well in the Florida Republican primary. I think that's going to backfire on Giuliani, to tell you the truth, because there's a lot of former New York transplants living down in Florida. They lived in New York when he was mayor. They knew what a crappy mayor he was. They knew how bad he was for New York. Other than 9/11, ask yourself where Rudy Giuliani was on 9/10, right? Any New Yorker out there will tell you he was loathed. I'm Radical Russ, your Red State refugee. When we come back, we're going to go right into our free-for-all and round up some of the other stories that you might have missed during the week. This is the Russ Belville Show, the home for truly radical progressives.
First-time caller? That's okay. He's a first-time radio host, the winner of the search for the next great progressive talk radio star. This is the Russ Belville Show.
Hello again. It's 35 after the hour, and you're listening to the Russ Belville Show, the weekend home of working-class patriots who still love America, defend the Constitution.
You can bet your life. Stakes are high and so am I. In the air tonight.
All right, it's time for our free-for-all. This is a chance for us to just round up all the miscellaneous stories that may have slipped through the cracks, give you a chance to hear something you may not have heard throughout the week. Want to give you an update on a story that I covered a couple weeks ago, the story of the woman, Jamie Lee Jones, who used to work for Halliburton / Kellogg Brown and Root in Iraq. She alleged that she was gang raped by her coworkers back in 2005, and after being raped was forced into a shipping container and held as a prisoner for at least 24 hours with no food or water. You might remember that story. And she eventually got herself a cell phone, called her dad. Her dad called her congressman, Representative Ted Poe, a Republican of Texas. That representative called the State Department. The State Department sent agents from the embassy in Baghdad who rescued Jones from the container. And so, based off of all of that story, the congressman called for investigations on this matter. And here's the update. Nothing. Yeah, nothing. Nothing has been done on this story. The Pentagon has decided it will not investigate the allegations that she was raped by her coworkers while working under an Army contract in Iraq. Representative Poe has said that he can't get any answers from the State Department or the Justice Department on any status of this investigation. Back in December, Senator Bill Nelson, the Democrat of Florida, asked Condoleezza Rice, our Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, and the Attorney General, Michael Mukasey, for information on the status of this investigation. He asked this back on December 21st. And what has he gotten since then? Yep, you got it. Silence. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Now, a Defense Department spokesman yesterday told people that the Justice Department considers the case open, so the Pentagon can't look into it. So we turn to the Justice Department, and they're not giving any terms either. So yeah, that's how we're treating our soldiers. That's how we're treating our contractors. That's how we're responding to the gang rape of a woman by her coworkers in Iraq. Now, in other news, another story in here. It's like Christmas all over again for me. That's right. Senator Larry Craig, my former senator, Senator Widenstance, is back in the news again. Yes, Larry Craig.
Let me be clear.
Yes, Larry.
I am not gay.
We understand.
I never have been
right.
gay.
Right.
I don't hit on any men.
Of
I'm
course.
not gay, and I don't cruise, and I don't hit on men.
Right. We understand that you're not gay and all. So anyway, Larry Craig is back because he's trying to appeal again his guilty plea that he willingly gave after weeks of thought and the chance to talk to a lawyer, which he didn't do. He is trying to get his guilty plea overturned, and this is how they're trying to get away with it. You know, and as I read this to you, remember how all the Republicans had such a fit when President Clinton was trying to parse the meaning of the word is, right? It depends on what the word is means, right? With the whole Monica Lewinsky case and how they were all talking about the rule of law. It didn't matter that it was just a private, consensual, sexual matter. It's all about the rule of law. You got to follow the rule of law. He broke the law. Well, here's Craig's case. Craig's lawyers are saying that he really technically couldn't have broken Minnesota's disorderly conduct law because according to Minnesota's disorderly conduct law, it says, quote, it requires that the conduct at issue have a tendency to alarm or anger others. Others, plural. And so they're arguing since that there was only one guy in the stall next to Senator Craig, that it can't possibly be disorderly conduct. Okay, and that's not enough. Here's their other attack, their other point of attack for trying to get this thing overturned. They're saying that the hand signal that Craig used to communicate an interest in getting it on, when he reached his hand underneath the stall, palms up, with his fingers tickling the underside of the stall to try to get the attention of the man next to him in what is known as a very commonly used proposition for gay sex. His lawyers are arguing now that is constitutionally protected speech. Well, okay, yeah, I suppose so. And that the statute requires that the illegal behavior be, quote, offensive, obscene, abusive, boisterous, or noisy, end quote. And then they're saying that since it was a hand signal, it was not offensive because a hand signal is silent and it can't possibly be boisterous or noisy. And since the hand signal wasn't the famous one-finger salute, it wasn't obscene or offensive. Wow. It's just amazing the lengths they will go to here to try to justify this behavior. And hey, I'm all for it. I think Larry Craig should run for another term. I think, keep this story alive. It's like manna from heaven for me. And one other story in the free-for-all here today has to do with one of our more less illustrious citizens, O.J. Simpson. Yeah, O.J. Simpson's back in the news again.
I think you can steal my and sell it. Don't let nobody out of here.
Has to do with that case there where O.J. Was involved in the robbery, trying to get back some of its sports memorabilia. And he returned to jail on Friday. He's going to have to spend several days before a judge hearing allegations that he violated the terms of his bail. Simpson was out on bail, and he was taken in handcuffs. And the deal was here is that Simpson left a message to his bail bondsman and was asking his bail bondsman to send this message along to one of Simpson's fellow defendants. And so, of course, the judge, in any case like that, is not going to allow these co-defendants to be able to communicate with each other to try to, keep their story straight or whatever they might do. So Simpson gives the message to the bail bondsman. The bail bondsman says, he left me a message instructing me to do something that violates a court order. Quote, I didn't want to get involved in such a dilemma or criminal act, end quote. Now, Simpson's attorney is denying the allegations. His attorney says O.J. did not try to persuade anybody to contact a witness. Look, whatever the excuse, let's keep O.J. in jail. Can we? Can we please just keep the guy in jail? If anything, just to spare me the sadness of having to read the stories again here. And one other thing here that's come up recently here. This is a story that's kind of brewing. And it has to do with our poor soldiers out there in Iraq and out in the war zones, suffering from such cases of post-traumatic stress disorder, that the military now is trying to do something about this issue. And what they're doing is they're instituting something known as let's see here, oh, excuse me, I lost the line here. But the problem is with the post-traumatic stress, they're trying to use pharmaceuticals to help the soldiers overcome their post-traumatic stress. There's this pill that's been used over the past couple of years, and it's sometimes used with rape victims, people who are victims of severe trauma. And what it does is it kind of reprograms the brain in such a way that it lessens the effect of stress on the brain. And the people that have studied this have said it's kind of like a moral lobotomy. What it does is it allows you to experience these terrible psychological traumas and not feel the remorse or guilt or victimization from that trauma. It magically wipes it away. And boy, this is really frightening stuff if you think about that. Thinking about a pill that would make it possible for a soldier to do any sort of terrible, awful act and not have to feel the remorse or guilt that comes with it. Now, there is a level here that we do have to understand when you're talking about war. War is hell, and there's some terrible, awful things that are going to have to happen during wartime. But the rates of the way that these soldiers here are going to have to deal with this, we're seeing rates of suicide in the Army that have been the highest rates in 26 years. According to CBS News, they found that over 6,250 American veterans took their own lives in 2005 alone. That's like 17 suicides every day of American veterans who are suffering, many of them, from post-traumatic stress disorder. And the problem with giving this type of training to our soldiers, or this type of drug to our soldiers that lessens their moral culpability, is how they're going to come back and fit back into civilian life after facing this. And how are they going to deal with the stressors of civilian life after they've been drugged to forget it all? We see all sorts of rates of domestic violence amongst soldiers. The domestic violence rates in the military, according to the Department of Defense, are 5 times that of those in the civilian population. And there were 2,374 reported cases of sexual assault in the military in 2005. That's a 40% increase from the year previous. And if we're going to have some terrible statistics like that, do you think that it's a good idea to then drug away their ability to feel any remorse for these actions? Boy, this is just going to make it worse. We're just going to get more and more of these heartbreaking cases coming out of George W. Bush's occupation of the Middle East. Now, we got one more segment. When we come back from the break, we will wrap things up with our show close and a very, very interesting topic. I hope you're not eating lunch, but when we come back from the break, I'm going to talk about Glenn Beck's butt. So stay tuned. See you in a minute.
This is the Russ Belville Show, the winner of America's search for the next great progressive talk radio star.
All right, welcome back. It's 51 after the hour, and I'm Radical Russ, your red state refugee, the weekend voice of the average American working class heroes like you the people who make this country great. I wanted to round out the last segment here with a story about, well, the $50 million man. You know, Glenn Beck out there on CNN Headline News, and he's the radio guy, and just recently signed a $50 million contract. You know, I actually have a lot in common with Glenn Beck. I grew up in the Mormon church, and Glenn Beck's a practicing Mormon, and Glenn Beck had his issues with drug addiction and alcoholism, or I think it was just alcoholism, but I've had my issues with drug addiction and alcoholism too. So when Glenn Beck speaks, I often take a listen to see how, if my mind was just not functioning properly, how I might have turned out. And well, Glenn was all over the news this week, and he was on the Good Morning America show, and he was talking about, well, his recent adventure into the American healthcare industry.
So if you didn't listen to the radio show this morning, you still may be wondering exactly what kind of surgery I had. So here it is. It was butt surgery. I had surgery on my ass. And that's about it. Without drugs, my pain was intolerable, and they put together a cocktail that was phenomenal. With that cocktail, I was having severe trouble breathing, and my mind went places that were darker than I have ever been before. And if you know my past, you know that's saying something.
Yeah, so Glenn Beck out there, he went into surgery, I believe it was for hemorrhoid surgery, and there's nothing funny about that. That's, it's a serious issue, and it can be very, very painful. But he goes into surgery for this, and he has all these complaints about how bad his care was after his surgery. First of all, there was some complications with the surgery, and Glenn had to have all this drug cocktail. He talked about it in some other clips where he talks about having Percocet, Darvocet, morphine, and fentanyl, which is a very, very strong painkiller out there. And he said that the painkillers caused him to hallucinate and go into these crazy hallucinations where he said it was kind of like the movie Saw, where he was seeing awful, terrible, horrific visions, torturous visions. And, when I first heard that, I got to thinking, I was a musician, and I grew up and was around a lot of people who used to do a lot of acid. And they would go on their little trips, from time to time. And they always talked about how, some people would say, I'd ask them, aren't you ever afraid of having a bad trip? I've heard things about bad trips. And they always told me, no, the people that have bad trips are the bad people. It's the people that have the bad karma, that are thinking negative thoughts, the people that are doing bad things in life, that tend to have the bad trips. So when Glenn Beck goes into a hallucination and is hallucinating terror and hallucinating torture, it sounds to me like a little bit of instant karma biting him on the butt, pardon the pun, because he's been supporting the administration that's all about torture, and he's always said that it's all great that we have Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib was no big deal and all of that. So a little bit of your chickens coming home to roost there. And what is it with the conservatives and their butts? Why is it always a butt problem with the conservative commentators? I mean, Rush Limbaugh, he got out of Vietnam because he had a polynoidal cyst on his butt. So what is up with that anyway? But the main point of this is that when Glenn Beck came back, he had to go back into the ER, the emergency room. And in the emergency room, he found he wasn't getting very good care.
When we got to the ER, there was such a lack of compassion that I've never seen anything like it.
Now, first of all, Glenn Beck, the fact that you were able to get those painkillers in the first place, that you were able to get the morphine and the fentanyl and all these really strong painkillers, has a lot to do with the fact that you're a rich white guy. There was a study that just came out a couple of weeks ago, and I referenced it on the show, that showed that African Americans and other minorities are severely undertreated for their pain because of the fact that many people believe that they're somehow drug addicts just trying to seek a fix. And the statistics bear it out, that the African Americans and other minorities are far less likely to receive the same level of pain-killing drugs as their white counterparts. So lucky for you, Glenn Beck, that you at least got the pain-killing drugs. A lot of people don't even get that. And lucky enough for you that you have health insurance and you can even go to see a doctor and have surgery. A lot of people have to live with those hemorrhoids for the rest of their life. They can't afford to go to some sort of surgery. But he goes to the ER and he complains that he's not getting very good care.
This hospital said to me, Glenn, we had problems with our facilities. I said, don't talk to me about the facilities. Talk to me about the people. People connecting with people. Let's emphasize the word care in healthcare.
That's his point. He seems to think it has nothing to do with our insurance industries in between the doctors and the patients. It has nothing to do with the pharmaceutical companies keeping the drugs high priced and keeping people away from their prescriptions. It's about the doctors and nurses at the ER, at the hospital, who aren't providing enough care. Well, part of the reason they aren't able to provide the care level that you might like is because they're having to treat so many uninsured people that have to go into the emergency room because they can't afford preventative care. That's part of the problem. You are the kind of person who has been supporting that kind of a problem. My wife works in healthcare. In fact, she works in gastroenterology. She could have been one of the people helping to take care of you, and I guarantee that her and the other people working in these places have far more compassion and care than you've got in your little finger. And part of the reason they're not able to deliver the care that you might deserve has to do a lot with the fact of these HMOs that require doctors to have to spend X number of minutes on a patient. I haven't heard that story from my wife so many times about the doctor saying, oh, I'd love to spend more time with you, but got to knock him out, knock him out, knock him out. Can't spend more time. 15 minutes. Gotta go from one patient to another. Keep going. And the nurses and the technicians there that are having to do janitorial work because the staffs have been cut, that are having to do all of these other tasks that have normally been assigned to assistants. This is exactly the reason why you're not getting the compassionate care, Glenn Beck. Okay, so let me go back to my happy place. I feel better now. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to the Russ Belville Show, the home for truly radical progressives, where we're going to keep on Glenn Beck's ass even if he does get the hemorrhoids taken off. We'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. Send me an email if you like, radicalruss@gmail.com. Check out the website, radicalruss.net.